And on the day that I'm finally judged, I will be glad to be free of this gnawing terror. I will be glad
to crumble in the light.
Deep in the recesses of Facebook, you'll find all types of wayward meme pages. Most are innocuous, but uninspired. Some meme pages go beyond that nomenclature and become art pieces. This page is just absurd poetry that uses the medium of social media to broadcast its sardonic nihilism and performative melancholy. It's a page where seemingly innocuous images of dogs, often bit-crushed, become warped with pedantic and flowery poetry akin to someone's reflection of their life before their final breath. The page, the images, and its creator are evidence that memes can be transgressive art. In this video, I'm going to examine the doggos are unhappy with your ceaseless petulance, and how it's one of the most underseen pieces of internet art. I'm going to examine the deliberate visualization, analyze the prose of the poetry, and make sense of why meme pages can be art in the first place. The Doggos Are Unhappy with Your Ceaseless Petulance was created on November 8th, 2015 by Johnny Bullduk. That same day, the first image was uploaded. A golden retriever on a MacBook in a black suit with human hands, accompanied by the text, "And on that day, I am finally judged. I'll be glad to be free of this gnawing terror. I will be glad to crumble in the light." The page would upload 4 more images later that day, pedantry and dark melancholy intact. The creator of the page has gone on to talk about their creative process and influences in an AMA on Reddit from 2020. Here's a quote from the AMA. "This is fun, so I joined a Facebook image macro group called People That and Sometimes Oh back in 2014. I also joined a few weird Facebook groups, now defunct, called The Cool Freaks, and started posting semi-related content to those pages. At some point in mid-2015, I decided to make a page as a joke, and shared images of those groups. It took off. I am also part of this page, and it is filled to the brim with ironic images containing pseudo-profundities and disparate elements. The page would go on to post frequently until July of 2021, where Jimmy disassociated doggos from the poetry and started promoting his own book. He has since come back to posting content, but weirdly without dogs. Things are starting to get more abstract on the page, but more on that later. Let's examine why Jimmy used dogs for the images, other than the name of the page itself. The obvious interpretation would be that dogs are funny, which is antithetical to the poetry, and there's an abundance of dog pictures on the internet. That might be the simplest explanation, but it may have been to facilitate ironic memes. Johnny's influence for the page came from meme groups and pages on Facebook doing similar content. The dogs weren't just used to juxtapose the poetry, it was to bring upon the next cycle of irony and memetics. I've talked about it several times on this channel before, but this page falls into the ironic meme cycle. It looks like a meme but doesn't function as one. The page's nomenclature also suggests that dogs play a role in the ironic presentation. The doggos are unhappy with your ceaseless petulance is overly verbose, but the use of the term doggos over dogs illustrates the page's self-awareness. Using dogs has a psychological reason as well. We anthropomorphize them. No, not like that. Not like that at all. Well, sometimes we do. As somebody who has had several dogs and currently has an all-seeing eye cat, it's hard not to read their most basic desires and instincts as less than a personality. However, that is mostly due to us creating the personality they may have in our own head. We often ascribe personalities to animals in videos we see online. This isn't to say that animals don't have personalities. In fact, they do. It's just that we imprint ourselves onto our pets and animals way more than we realize. The page's poetry is amplified by our over-anthropomorphication, if that's even a word. There is no way that this dog in this situation is having a dreadful internal monologue with flowery language. This picture doesn't give any indication that this dog is reciting a Godspeed You Black Emperor lyric or describing a situation in as great of detail like Peter Blatty in the first few pages of The Exorcist. Dogs are probably the most unpretentious animal. You ever been around one of these fucking things? They go crazy for any crumb of attention. Even the angry ones just act on one emotion. Ugh. If the page was, "The Caddos are tired of your ceaseless petulance," the absurd juxtaposition wouldn't really be there. When I get up in the morning and this little shit goblin is screaming at me for food, I always imagine a dark ambient track is playing in his head while he's writing the worst eulogy for himself. This would never really happen with a dog. Dogs are mostly simple, and we certainly envy dogs for how simple they can be. Simply put, John, the creator of this page, took the simplicity away from dogs with the not-so-simple poetry. It's that simple. But just for a moment, let's strip away the funny pictures of the dogs and examine the prose of the writing. The visual element is only 50% of why these images are as interesting as they are. On a first look, it may seem that the verbosity and attempts at being profound are what create the humor, but after years of letting these images cause an untold amount of brain damage, its prose is probably a little bit more deliberate and structured than its first impression would give. There is careful consideration to how each piece of writing begins and ends. I'm going to go through a few examples and analyze the structure and try to deconstruct the microcosms of each poem. This is the immutable classic and where it all started. It's only 2 lines, but it perfectly illustrates the format that John establishes for the page. The first sentence is revealing and dramatic. The anguish of this dog's inevitable judgment plagues their minds so viciously that they plead to be free of this gnawing terror. The culmination of their regrets and fears have consumed them. This first sentence establishes an impossibly forlorn tone. What did someone do to reflect on themselves like this? The second and last line is maybe the most important line in all of the page's history, as it became a symbol for fans of the page. I will be glad to crumble in the light. The immediate acceptance of their fate strips all dramatic tension away from the first line. It's such a well-paced whiplash of ideas, and this bookended structure would come to define this page's identity in writing.
My attempts at living a good life have been met with mockery and defeat. A self-aware and unjust universe guffaws heartily at my naivete. As the darkness closes on my vision, I offer a final, unsuccessful plea in the form of my own sincere morality. My only regret was hope.
This one is deliberately structured in 4 different lines, and the first and last line are perfect examples of how John bookends the writing in these images. It starts off with egregious self-pity, but by the end is met with clarity through acceptance of the end. Notice how each sentence descends into acceptance and further drops the pretense that this broccoli doggo can be saved. Some of John's best work on this page are the ones with 4 lines.
I alone turn and focus my insufficient gaze just as the final moment engulfs me. A cacophony of shrieks tumble out of the void and claim me as their own. As one, we seek retribution against the diseased and petulant souls who litter the dead landscape, erasing God's mistakes from time's memory. We are coming.
This one follows the same format but flips the content on its head. Instead of petulant and dramatic self-reflection turned begrudging acceptance, the anguish itself becomes personified. "We are coming" is ominous and an omen, seemingly coming from the dog or the dog being told this. I like to interpret this as the dog hearing this from an amorphous being off-screen. This is one of my favorites from the page, and John's prose is not vague to the point of being unreadable. John's personality bleeds through these images. There's a hint of story going on here in all these images. You get the sense of ambition and scale as you read more of these. Very rarely does a meme creator allow themselves to be revealed through such a disposable medium. In April of 2022, John released an ebook called Dog, which takes place in what he dubs the petulant universe. It's only 62 pages, and most of it's already up in the form of posts on John's personal page, but I encourage you to go spend a few bucks on it. While there isn't a visual element for Dog, its language is vivid and descriptive enough to evoke images of a story not too unlike the memes he has been posting for years. It takes a narrative approach to the entire page's concept and is a compelling read. It also recontextualizes the previous work on his page, so if you want to experience all of it, you kinda have to go read this. It's one of the reasons I love this page so much. There's a clear progression and evolution on display here. Meme pages as a medium of art are underappreciated. And bear with me on this, but meme pages as an art are just a symptom of the emergence of meta-modernism. This is where shit's gonna get dense, so put on your fucking thinking caps. Meta-modernism, or postmodernism, as simple as I can put it without alienating everyone watching this video, is a new movement in art and philosophy that has been defined as oscillating between the sentiments of modernism and postmodernism. Just so I'm not losing anybody, here's a brief primer of the two. Modernism is often defined by its rejection of reason and romanticizations as a reaction to what was happening at the beginning of the industrialized world. The development of capitalism and the First World War completely changed people's perception of the truth. Our understanding of society was quickly becoming outdated, so it recontextualized older forms of thinking like spiritualism. Modernism, as I understand it, is the rejection of realism and our search for reason and rationality. Modern art is defined by how abstract ideas come to define an art's message. Let's take for example Van Gogh's Starry Night. This might be the most important example of modernist art. Starry Night is an illustration of Van Gogh's stay in an asylum. And Van Gogh, who is an impressionistic artist, distorted reality to express his ideas. It purposely forgoes the realism of previous eras' art to allow more interpretation. The celestial bodies color and illuminate the world below better than day. Impressionism itself is a form of modernist art, and Van Gogh's stylings can be best explained as his personal filter for reality. The craft in modern art is still important here, and one thing that concerns modern art is the idea of progress, which would come to be a main criticism from its successor. Postmodernism would come to be defined as a reaction to modernism. World War II and the advent of mutually assured destruction through the atom bomb made us rethink how we interface with modernity. Our rapid technological and sociological advancement made our art, philosophy, and literature quite meta. The fact modern society can end at any time made our art extremely self-aware and deliberately insincere. Art like this is less about the craft and more about the subjective meaning. Postmodernism is the skepticism of modernity. Not everything can be rationalized. Everything is relative and knowledge itself cannot be objective. All we have is our perception. Postmodern art reflects these sentiments. Andy Warhol's Marilyn Diptych is a great example of postmodern art and how it can contrast with modern art. Craft is of little concern as the audience's interpretation of the piece is just as important to the experience as the art itself. Andy Warhol's entire career in art was just to criticize the traditional ideas of art, specifically high art. Marilyn Diptych is a perfect foil to something like Starry Night. It wasn't necessarily concerned with the beauty or craft like Van Gogh's piece was. In fact, it cared more about irony and deconstruction. Meta-modern art criticizes form while using form as its medium of art. Like previously mentioned, it oscillates between modernism and postmodernism. Metamodernism embraces the sincerity of modern art while allowing postmodern aesthetics to inform its messaging and craft. This doesn't mean it blends the two movements' traits seamlessly. Several who have espoused metamodern values, notably the authors and editors of Meta-Modernism, historicity, effect, and depth after postmodernism, talk about metamodernism's rapid oscillation of modernism and postmodernism. Here's a quote. Rather, it is a pendulum swinging between 2, 3, 5, 10 innumerable poles. Each time the metamodern enthusiasm swings towards fanaticism, gravity pulls it back toward irony. The moment its irony sways towards apathy, gravity pulls it back towards enthusiasm. A good and well-known example of metamodern art is BoJack Horseman, the Netflix animated series about the life of a washed-up sitcom star who is also a horse. It emulates postmodern irony and cynicism of The Simpsons, but instead of going back to the status quo like The Simpsons does, it yearns for progress and meaning. This is evidenced by the characters' developments and awareness of the irony and cynicism that they're displaying. With concern to the doggos are unhappy with their ceaseless petulance, the dogs and the poetry are literally oscillating between modernism and postmodernism in its visualization. Whether the poetry is in a blank box above or below or in the foreground of the image, the modernistic sense of sincerity of the poetry and the ironic use of the dogs is constantly juxtaposing each other. You can apply this same framework to much of today's meme culture. Our use and reuse of pop culture is often used as an ironic veneer to something sincere and potentially meaningful. Something else to consider is that the medium of posting memes on a Facebook page also makes this meta-modern art. We often view social media pages as just services to post and browse on, but in a way, it's a canvas that we paint on, just with a built-in timeline feature. I was once told that a line is just a dot extended. Stripping away the engagement buttons and HTML code, that's what we'll see here, a timeline of an artist. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram will, for better or worse, never let you customize your pages to the extent MySpace or normal web pages will. There are already convincing arguments for web pages as art, or even meta-modern art. And if we extend the same gratitude to Facebook meme pages, it might be seen as a stretch. The doggos should be used as a prime example of this. It establishes a canon, and the art itself must be interfaced through the form of Facebook. Even though its delivery method is a pastiche of older internet art, my admiration comes from its resilience to keep doing it despite how the internet is making it harder to facilitate personal expression. There's something missing about our current Web 2.0. It's streamlined and homogenized for the purposes of showing content. My vague feelings of ennui get stuffed out once I realize that these might be the methods needed to organize and parse such a wealth of content. And maybe that's what makes the doggos are unhappy with your ceaseless petulance so special to me personally. I was one of the lucky few who got to see this content when John started. Stuff like this often goes viral, but there are only a few pages on the internet that use their platform the way that John does. Reducing these images down to a dramatic, non-rhythmic poetry strung about pictures of dogs does a disservice to the artistry being displayed here. There is, at the very least, a hint of intent behind each image. The reason most of these images work as well as they do is because of how carefully considered they are, not only in their writing, but visualization. The text placement on the images themselves also carries some intent. It has no eye for readability, as it is helping to establish the tone. Some of those who create similar images or memes in the sometimes and oh page on Facebook emulate this, but often miss the core idea of what makes these images so special to begin with. It's simple in its presentation, but multi-layered. The spacing and indentation of the text itself adds to the experience. I've been continually coming back to look at all these images because they just keep on giving. Memes are consumable and ever malleable, but often not profound enough to make you think about the artistry behind them. This page is one of the few instances where I recognize the art before the meme. At the very least, go give John a follow or purchase some of his self-published titles. If even not for that, if you can't see the artistry behind these memes, maybe you too have crumbled in the light. Or you just think the dogs are too funny, I don't know. Hey, thanks for watching the video. I know it's a little long and dense and it goes in a bunch of places, but before I go into a small addendum to this essay, I'd like to shout out Leon Massey and Bren Daniel. Their links will be in the description. They have much bigger channels than mine, so I'm sure you probably heard of them. But thank you for lending your voices to the meme section. This is a small addendum to the essay that I wanted to include afterwards as kind of like an optional piece. I want to recommend Yellow Swans' Going Places. It's a music album, and it mostly relates to the meta-modern art section. It's a harsh noise record that is really cathartic and kind of hypnotic in an ethereal sense. But it's still a harsh noise record, so it kind of combines the element of beauty with like the irony and criticism of harsh noise, which harsh noise is kind of like a postmodern type of music genre to begin with. I kind of wanted to recommend that because it's one of my personal favorite albums. It probably would have padded out the video more than it needed, so I'm padding it out here at the end when you can just click off. But go check out that album. But thank you for watching this video. This is one of the best videos I've made so far, I think. So, thanks.